There is a man who has outlived every general, every admiral, every Lord Commander the Segmentum has produced in living memory. He has watched the chapter masters of his successor chapters rise, lead for decades and fall in battle, and then watched their successors do the same, and the ones who came after them. The campaigns he commanded in his youth are studied now as ancient history rather than recalled as experience, and somewhere in the long span of those 15 centuries a vision took hold in him that has never left. He stands at the doors of the Imperial Palace on Terra, the last defender of a dying god, and he falls there. Not in retreat, not by chance. He falls as the final act of something that has been building since a child named Luis first looked up at a burning amber sky on a desert moon and decided to survive. His name is Commander Dante, and the gap between that child and the man who carries the face of a dead Primarch into battle is not a story of triumph. It is a story of endurance so absolute it has become indistinguishable from duty. Baal Secundus, the world that shapes monsters. The Baal system is not a place that produces softness. The twin moons, Baal Primus and Baal Secundus, orbit the primary world, and both have been scoured by radiation until what remains is a bare, cracked landscape hostile to almost every form of life that has not specifically evolved to survive it. Ancient catastrophes, possibly the same wars that tore the galaxy apart during the Age of Strife, stripped these moons of any protection they might once have possessed. The sky over Baal Secundus burns deep amber. The ground is irradiated. Water is scarce enough to kill for, and the fauna that has survived the millennia has done so by becoming extremely efficient at killing anything softer than itself. The creatures the tribes contend with have names: razor wings, sand vipers, the fast-striking predators that inhabit the deep crevasse systems running through the moon's broken rock. None of them are large by the standards of the wider galaxy's megafauna. All of them are lethal in the specific way that desert predators become lethal, patient, enduring, and adapted to strike at the precise moment their prey is most vulnerable. Surviving childhood on Baal Secundus requires the same qualities. The tribes that scratch existence from this moon are not the remnants of a fallen civilization. They are the product of generations of selection harsh enough to have filtered out nearly everything that could not endure. The tribes cooperate because the desert punishes isolation. A single family cannot maintain a perimeter, cannot share watch, cannot pool water through the dry months. Children who cannot contribute are a liability that kills everyone. Children who can are given responsibility young and expected to carry it. Into this world, somewhere in the 41st millennium, a child named Luis was born to a tribeswoman already dying of the radiation sickness that the desert slowly gave everyone who lived long enough on Baal Secundus. She was gone before he was old enough to properly grieve her. His tribe raised him. Luis was a natural leader, though not through aggression or the kind of dominance that wins fights. He had something quieter. People deferred to him in moments of crisis, instinctively, before he had said anything. Younger children found his presence steadying. Older warriors listened when he spoke. The authority he carried came from being right under pressure, which on Baal Secundus is the only authority that lasts. He survived the desert, grew into it, and eventually was brought before the Blood Angels' recruiters, as exceptional children on Baal Secundus had been for thousands of years. The trials of blood, becoming something inhuman. The Blood Angels draw their initiates from a population already so hardened by environment that the trials designed to eliminate the weak have to be brutal, almost beyond comprehension to actually eliminate anyone. The aspirants are subjected to tests of physical endurance, psychological threshold, and finally the monstrous biological transformation of the implantation process itself. The human body is not designed to accept the battery of additional organs required by the implantation process, or the genetic heritage of a Primarch laid over the top of that. Many aspirants die in the trials. Many more die during implantation. Those who survive are permanently and irrevocably separated from the species they were born into. Luis survived everything. The record of his aspirant years is not extensive because the Blood Angels do not maintain detailed histories of warriors who have not yet earned them, but what is preserved points toward a young man of ferocious talent and almost unsettling calm. The quality that had made him a leader in the desert translated directly into the military framework of the chapter. He understood hierarchy without resenting it. He grasped tactics with an intuitive speed that his trainers noted as unusual even in a cohort drawn from the hardest world in the system. And he had a capacity for absorbing loss, for grieving and continuing to function, that would prove to be the most consequential thing about him across the centuries that followed. When the transformation was complete and Luis took his new name, he became Brother Dante of the Blood Angels. The boy from the desert was gone. In his place stood something older and far more dangerous, though he was still a youth by any measure that would later come to matter. The flaw in the blood, what he carried. The Blood Angels carry two afflictions that no other chapter shares, and both trace directly to the death of their Primarch Sanguinius at the hands of the arch-traitor Horus. To understand why this death resonates as profoundly as it does, the context matters. The Blood Angels are a first founding chapter, one of the original Space Marine legions created by the Emperor at the dawn of the Great Crusade, when humanity was being reclaimed from the darkness of the Age of Strife. They fought in those wars under Sanguinius himself, who led them for 2 centuries of campaigning before the Horus heresy shattered everything. When Horus raised his rebellion, Sanguinius fought on the side of the Emperor. He was present at the Siege of Terra, holding the walls of the Imperial Palace when Horus's forces beat against them. He was by all accounts one of the last things standing between the Emperor and defeat. When the Emperor finally teleported to the Bridge of the Vengeful Spirit to confront Horus, Sanguinius was already there. He had teleported separately or been taken, and he faced Horus alone. He died there. And the manner of his death, fighting a battle he could not win, buying moments that may have made the difference between the Emperor's victory and the Imperium's extinction, is the wound that never healed in the Blood Angels' collective psyche. They are called the Red Thirst and the Black Rage, and they are not metaphors or psychological weaknesses or failures of faith. They are biological and neurological conditions encoded into the gene seed itself, as real and as permanent as any organ the implantation process provides. The Red Thirst is the older affliction. It manifests as an overwhelming hunger for blood, specifically the blood of enemies, a drive that carries a component of ecstatic frenzy that the warriors who experience it describe as both exhilarating and terrifying. A Blood Angel in the grip of the Red Thirst can maintain discipline if his training is sufficient, but the pull toward frenzy is constant and never truly resolved. The chapter manages it through ritual, meditation, and careful monitoring of warriors showing signs of onset. At the center of this management is the Sanguinary Priesthood, and at the center of the Sanguinary Priesthood is Corbulo, the High Sanguinary Priest, and his most sacred relic, the Red Grail, a chalice said to hold a preserved remnant of Sanguinius' own blood. Corbulo drinks from it to steel his own resolve and uses it to anoint those in his care. It is his relic specifically, not shared across the broader priesthood, and the chapter does not discuss the specifics of these observances outside its own ranks. The Sanguinary Priests manage the Red Thirst through ritual and close monitoring of warriors showing signs of onset, but the Grail is Corbulo's alone. Cure is not on offer regardless. Management is the limit of what is possible. The Black Rage is worse. It is a psychological collapse in which the afflicted warrior begins to experience the final moments of Sanguinius' death not as historical knowledge but as immediate present reality. They feel what he felt. They see through his eyes. Horus, the vengeful spirit's bridge, the killing blow that ended the greatest of the Emperor's sons. The capacity to distinguish between past and present disintegrates, and the warrior becomes consumed with grief and fury so complete that coordinated action is no longer possible. They become something closer to a force of nature, virtually unstoppable, entirely uncontrollable, and doomed. Warriors showing the earliest signs of the Rage's onset are taken to the black cells within the Arx Angelicum, where chaplains watch over them through the progress of their descent. When the Rage has consumed them entirely, they are inducted into the Death Company. They're given black armor marked with the red saltires and blood drops of their brother's mourning. They are assigned the most dangerous positions in any engagement, deployed where their unstoppable fury is militarily useful, and they die in the fighting. Almost none return. The Death Company is a mercy structured as an execution, and every Blood Angel commander who has ever consigned brothers to it has carried that weight afterward. The wider Imperium knows none of this, not in any verified form. The Blood Angels have maintained the secrecy of the flaw since the chapter's founding, deflecting inquiry from the Inquisition and other chapters alike, explaining the Death Company as warriors who mourn the Primarch in the traditional manner. The Inquisition has suspected the truth for a long time. Suspicion and proof are not the same thing, and the Blood Angels have never supplied the proof. Dante's tenure as chapter master has required managing this institutional deception alongside everything else, sustaining a cover story across 11 centuries while simultaneously bearing personal responsibility for everyone the flaw has claimed. Dante has consigned more brothers to the Death Company than any other commander in history. Across 11 centuries of command, the accumulated number is staggering, and he has refused to let it become merely a statistic. He remembers them, not as a general principle but specifically, individually. Every warrior he has sent forward in black armor, every face he knew before the rage took it. He maintains this remembrance deliberately as a discipline against the administrative temptation to let the dead become data. The aesthetic inheritance, what Sanguinius left besides the flaw. There is a dimension of the Blood Angel's identity that most accounts subordinate to the flaw, and doing so misses something essential about why the flaw cuts as deeply as it does. The Blood Angels are artists. They have been since the chapter's founding, since Sanguinius himself, who was as gifted a sculptor and painter as he was a warrior, shaped the culture of his legion in his own image. The fortress monastery at Baal is filled with work produced across 10 millennia. The corridors contain murals, sculptures, and manuscript illuminations that would be priceless relics of lost human civilization in any other context. Here they are simply what the warriors of the chapter make in the time between wars. This is not decorative. It is not the hobby of warriors who happen to be aesthetically inclined. It is an expression of the same heightened sensitivity that makes the Blood Angels exceptional in battle. And that makes the red thirst and black rage so much harder to manage than comparable genetic afflictions in other chapters. The Blood Angels feel more. They are more aware of beauty and of loss. The capacity that makes a warrior stop and paint what he sees in the brief quiet between campaigns is the same capacity that makes the red thirst pull toward sensation so overwhelming, and the same capacity that makes the black rage, when it comes, not merely a loss of rational function but a total emotional catastrophe. Whether Dante himself has contributed to those archives in any direct sense is not something the chapter has ever stated publicly. That a man who has lived 15 centuries in the Blood Angels culture, formed by a Primarch who was as gifted an artist as he was a warrior, would engage with that tradition in some form is a reasonable inference. What is certain is that the desert, Baal Secundus, the amber sky, the scale of an environment with no interest in human survival, runs through the Blood Angels' visual tradition across the full span of their history. The chapter paints what shaped it. The centuries of ascent, how a brother becomes a commander. Dante's ascent through the Blood Angel structure took centuries. He moved through the scout company and into battle companies, fighting across campaigns that have since passed into the chapter's historical record rather than living memory. He earned rank through demonstrated excellence, through tactical instinct sharpened against real enemies across real campaigns, and through the simple act of surviving, which in the Blood Angels is itself a distinction at scale. He served as sergeant, then as a senior battle brother among a company's veterans, then as captain. Each step widened the operational scope he was responsible for and deepened his understanding of how the chapter functioned at the strategic rather than individual level. He developed relationships with warriors who would become significant figures in chapter history. He fought in engagements that spanned years and decades. During these centuries, he also began to notice something about himself that he could not explain. Space Marines do not age in the normal sense, but they die in war with terrible regularity. Brothers who had trained alongside him were gone. Their successors in the same positions were gone. Dante remained. He was wounded, sometimes severely enough that his recovery was measured in weeks rather than days. He was never killed. As the decades became centuries, the gap between his experience and that of every other warrior in the chapter became visible in a way it had never been early in his service. He was not simply long-lived. He was becoming something unprecedented. He became captain of one of the chapter's battle companies, a position he held with a distinction that the chapter's records note in terms that point to something beyond tactical competence alone. His company achieved results that other companies did not. His strategic read of engagements consistently exceeded what the immediate tactical information seemed to warrant. The warriors under him displayed a cohesion that traced directly to the specific quality of his command. When the chapter master before him fell in battle, the succession required no debate. The weight of the mask, becoming chapter master. The transition from captain to chapter master of the Blood Angels is not simply a promotion in authority. It carries a specific ritual burden that no other chapter imposes on its leaders in the same form. The new chapter master dons the death mask of Sanguinius. The death mask is an ancient golden face covering crafted in the precise likeness of the Primarch's features. Sanguinius was described across the histories of the Horus heresy as possessing a near supernatural physical perfection, an angelic beauty that contributed to his status as one of the most beloved figures in the entire Imperium. The mask captures this. It is serene and inhuman, a perfect golden face that the chapter master wears in battle and in formal ceremony. When Dante stands before enemies or allies or the massed armies of the Imperium, they do not see his face. They see the face of a dead god. The effect is deliberate. The mask converts Dante from a military commander into a symbol, the living representative of a legacy that was broken 10,000 years ago when Sanguinius fell at the hands of Horus. Enemies who face him are not facing a very old and very skilled warrior alone. They are facing the walking specter of a Primarch's memory in golden plate, descending from the sky on the wings of the icon of the angel. The mask also serves a more practical function. Dante's face after 15 centuries is not the face of a young man. Space marine biology does not age in the human sense, but across such extreme spans of time the signs accumulate. Behind the mask he is ageless. He is the angel. His signature war gear was already ancient when he inherited it. The Axe Mortalis, a master-crafted power axe whose history predates Dante's tenure as chapter master, became his primary weapon. The Perdition Pistol, a modified inferno pistol that fires focused melta energy at close range, completes the close quarters picture. The Icon of the Angel, the ancient jump pack maintained by the chapter's tech marines with the reverence due any relic, carries him into battle. When he descends, the golden wings of the icon spread behind him, and the image of the golden masked angel falling from the sky with axe raised has become one of the defining images in Blood Angel's iconography. Armed and masked, Dante stepped into a role he would hold for over 1100 years. The Sanguinary Guard, the angels who guard the angel. A commander of Dante's stature does not fight alone, and the Sanguinary Guard are the finest warriors the chapter produces. They are the living embodiment of the Blood Angel's martial ideal, veterans chosen not merely for combat excellence but for a bearing and discipline that reflects the chapter's aesthetic identity as much as its lethality. In battle, they serve as both Dante's personal honor guard and as a precision assault element, capable of independent action in engagements where their specific qualities are decisive. They wear golden artificer armor and carry glaives in carmine, master-crafted power glaives whose disruption fields are calibrated to a quality well beyond standard chapter armories. Their Angelus bolt carbines fire at a higher rate than a standard bolt pistol and carry specialist ammunition, giving them a volume of fire that complements the close-quarters devastation of the glaives. The Guard are not bodyguards in any passive sense. In battle, they operate as an assault element of extreme precision, striking in tight formation at the precise moment the tactical situation offers a decisive blow. Their presence alongside Dante creates a visual impression that goes beyond the mechanical. A phalanx of golden armored warriors descending under jump packs. The death mask at their center is an image that has ended the will to fight in enemies who might have otherwise held. Dante commands them directly and has done so for centuries, which means the Guard operates with a collective experience and a shared battlefield language that no newly formed unit can replicate. They know his tendencies, his angles of approach, the moments when he will press forward and the moments when he holds. The Guard has been rebuilt many times over centuries of war. The institutional memory persists regardless. 11 centuries of command. The shape of a long war. The principles Dante established in his early years as chapter master shaped Blood Angel's operations for centuries. The specific engagements that survive in detail illuminate the man beneath the mask more clearly than any summary of his record could manage. Early in his tenure, Dante established the protocols that would define Blood Angel's operations for generations. He was meticulous about maintaining the chapter's strength. He hated losing brothers. This was not sentiment in any soft sense. The Blood Angel's gene seed was precious, their warriors were irreplaceable, and spending them carelessly was an insult to everything Sanguinius had built. He held his captains to a standard of tactical care that some found excessive, and he spent political capital with the Administratum and the Departamento Munitorum, arguing for operational autonomy on the grounds that the chapter's specialized nature required it. He also, from the first years of command, bore the Death Company in a way that defined his relationship with loss for everything that followed. He developed specific rights for warriors inducted into black armor. He kept records. He refused to allow the Death Company to become simply a disposal mechanism, a way of converting the chapter's grief into a military asset and nothing else. The warriors who went forward in black armor were remembered, named, mourned. This practice was not universal across the Blood Angel's successor lineage, and Dante's insistence on it created friction with successor chapters whose commanders took a harder view. He held his position on it regardless. The execution of that mercy fell across centuries to Astarath the Grim. Known as the Redeemer of the Lost, Astarath is the High Chaplain of the Blood Angels, and his role is singular in the chapter structure. He travels the successor chapters, seeking out warriors consumed by the Black Rage, and when no tactical deployment exists that might turn their final frenzy into something useful, he administers the final death himself. Astarath does not do this reluctantly. He was chosen for the role because he understood what it was, because he possessed the specific quality of absolute commitment to a mercy that offers no comfort to the person performing it. Dante has relied on him across centuries of command. They share between them the full weight of the Death Company, Dante bearing the grief of every brother who enters it, Astarath bearing the necessity of ending those who cannot be saved any other way. The Second War for Armageddon, Tycho, Mephiston, and one campaign's two legacies. The hive world of Armageddon has drawn Imperial forces into its orbit more than once across the millennium, and Dante was present for the second of those conflicts. The Second War for Armageddon in 941. M41 was an orc invasion of catastrophic scale, the war boss Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka bringing the full weight of a Wa'a against one of the Imperium's most strategically valuable industrial worlds. The Blood Angels committed significant forces to the defense. Among Dante's commanders at the Second War was Captain Tycho of the Third Company, a warrior whose service Dante had watched across decades and regarded as exceptional. Tycho was not simply effective in the field. He was the kind of captain who understood the Blood Angel's character at the institutional level, a commander who could hold a company together through the worst that a campaign produced. He had already proven this across a career that included a wound from the First War for Armageddon in 444 M41, when Angron, demon Primarch of the World Eaters, led a vast demonic incursion against the Hive world. In that campaign, Tycho's face had been so badly disfigured that he wore a golden mask for the remainder of his service. The mask was not ceremonial. It was a prosthetic, covering injuries too severe to heal entirely, even with Space Marine biology. It was also, in retrospect, a mirror held up to his commander. One of Dante's finest captains spent his last decades wearing a golden face that was not his own. Though where Dante wore the face of a Primarch as an act of deliberate symbolic weight, Tycho wore it because war had taken his. Tycho fell to the Black Rage at the Second War. The descent was not sudden. It progressed through the campaign in the way the Rage sometimes does, a gradual erosion of the boundary between present and past, until the man Dante had commanded alongside was gone, and what remained was a warrior in black armor fighting a battle that had ended 10,000 years ago. Dante sent him forward in the Death Company. Tycho died on the ash wastes of Armageddon, his final actions directed at orc positions rather than anywhere his shattered psyche could distinguish. The accounts preserved from that period describe Dante's response to Tycho's death in terms that do not attempt to aesthetize it. He grieved, plainly and without the performance of stoicism. He recorded Tycho's name alongside all the others, and he continued, because continuing is what the role requires, That same campaign produced the opposite of what Tycho's story represents. Mephiston, then named Calistarius, was among the Blood Angels warriors who fell to the Black Rage during the siege of Hades' Hive. He was buried under the rubble of a collapsed building and remained there, sealed in darkness, for 7 days, fighting the rage from inside it rather than being carried away by it. When he emerged, the Black Rage was gone. He had burned through it by force of will alone, and the man who crawled out of those ruins bore almost no resemblance to the librarian who had gone in. The same campaign that consumed Tycho produced, in the same ash and rubble, the only Blood Angel who has ever broken free of the flaw entirely. The burden of the long life, immortality as grief. The official histories of the Blood Angels do not have the conversation about what it costs to outlive everyone. The apologists and hagiographers focus on battles, on the strategic tenure, on the record of an unbroken command spanning more than a millennium. The private accounts, the records of conversations with chaplains and trusted subordinates preserved in the chapter's restricted archives, are less comfortable. Dante described his relationship with time as something he had learned to carry rather than conquered. Each warrior sent to the death company was a specific grief cataloged alongside specific memories. The sound of a particular brother's voice, the way he held a bolter, a joke told in a staging bay before a drop that never happened again. Each successor chapter master who died under his nominal authority, in a relationship that sat somewhere between alliance and wardenship, was a figure he had known across years of intermittent contact. Warriors he had fought alongside for decades were gone, and he was not. The Blood Angels' successors number in the dozens. The Flesh Tearers, the Angels Encarmine, the Angels Sanguine, the Angels Vermilion, the Blood Drinkers, the Lamenters, and many more, all carry the same cursed gene seed. All look to Dante in formal terms or informal ones as the patriarch of their inheritance. Chapter masters of these successor chapters are not immortal in the way Dante appears to be. They die in war, as Space Marines always do. Dante has known the leaders of these chapters across multiple generations of succession, watched them take command, serve with distinction, fall, and be replaced by warriors whose predecessors he had also known. By the closing decades of the 41st millennium, the sources are explicit about what this accumulated weight has produced. Dante was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. He was tired of outliving people. He carried in conversations he perhaps did not expect to be preserved, the question of whether the vision he had been given since early in his command, the vision of his death at the foot of the Golden Throne, represented something he feared or something he was waiting for. The vision came to him early in his command and has never left. He sees himself standing at the gates of the Imperial Palace on Terra, the last defense, overwhelmed, falling in sacrifice. He has never dismissed it as a dream. He treats it with the settled certainty of a man who has lived long enough to distinguish between fear and premonition, as a statement of his eventual fate. A man who believes he knows where he will die approaches every battle with a specific psychology. Not reckless because dying in the wrong place would be a kind of failure, but without the fear that most living things carry into war. Death is coming in a specific place and at a specific time. Until then, he is, in a sense, protected from it by the shape of the story he believes he is living. Mephiston. The question Dante will not answer. No Blood Angel had ever done what Mephiston did at Hades' Hive. No Blood Angel has done it since. The chapter's chaplains and sanguinary priests have never reached consensus on what he is now. The most conservative position holds that he overcame the flaw through exceptional psychic strength and that the apparent changes to his personality, his aura, his relationship to normal Astartes psychology, are residual effects of the ordeal. The less conservative positions involve speculation that the chapter finds deeply uncomfortable. Dante's relationship with Mephiston is characterized in the sources as one of genuine respect sitting alongside genuine unease. He relies on the Lord of Death in ways he relies on no other officer, and there are accounts of Mephiston offering counsel in crisis situations that Dante acted on directly. At the same time, Dante has never publicly endorsed the interpretation of Mephiston's transformation as simply a remarkable act of will. He holds the question open in the way he holds most questions that don't have comfortable answers, by acknowledging the uncertainty and continuing to act in the face of it. The Sanguinor, the mystery he has met. The Blood Angels' oldest mystery is not the Red Thirst or the Black Rage. Those at least have biological explanations, however incomplete. The Sanguinor resists explanation of any kind. Dante is one of the few commanders on record who has encountered it directly. The Sanguinor is a golden warrior, fully armored in the manner of the Sanguinary Guard, but of a quality and presence beyond what any living Blood Angel carries, who appears without warning at moments of extreme crisis for Sanguinius's bloodline. It does not communicate, it does not explain itself. It fights alongside Blood Angels' warriors with a ferocity and an effectiveness that exceed anything explicable by the normal parameters of enhanced human physicality, and when the crisis has passed, it is gone. No one sees it leave. It is simply no longer present. The theories about its nature span the theological and the practical. Some chaplains hold it to be a manifestation of Sanguinius's spirit, a fragment of the Primarch's psyche preserved in the warp that returns when his sons are at their most desperate. The sanguinary priests point to its alignment with the Blood Angel's sacred imagery and argue it represents a form of divine intercession from the Emperor. More skeptical observers within the chapter suggest it is a powerful warp entity that has taken an alignment favorable to the Blood Angels for reasons that remain opaque, and that treating it as a spiritual patron introduces a dangerous dependency on something whose motives are unknown. Dante characteristically has not committed to any of these positions publicly. He has encountered the Sanguinor and recorded the experience. He has noted that its appearance preceded a turning point in the engagement where it appeared. He has declined to speculate beyond what he directly observed. In a chapter where questions of faith and the nature of the Primarch's legacy are never far from the surface, Dante's refusal to provide a definitive interpretation of the Sanguinor is itself a kind of answer about his relationship to certainty. The Cryptus Campaign, the prelude to catastrophe. The campaign at Cryptus was not the beginning of Dante's long preparation for what came at Baal, but it was the moment when preparation became certainty. Hive Fleet Leviathan's leading tendrils had reached the Cryptus system, which sat directly on the approach corridor to the Baal system. Losing Cryptus would mean losing the early warning and the defensive staging that Baal's survival might require. Dante prosecuted the defense of Asphodex with the full weight of the Blood Angel's capabilities, coordinating forces from the Adepta Sororitas, the Astra Militarum, and several successor chapters into a combined defensive effort that held the Tyranids back as long as holding was possible. The battles were grinding and ultimately untenable. The Tyranids could not be stopped at Cryptus, only delayed. Dante understood this from the initial assessment. He fought anyway because every hour he bought at Asphodex was an hour Baal could use, and buying hours at Asphodex was worth whatever it cost. By the time the defense of Cryptus collapsed and the Blood Angels withdrew, Dante had a clear enough picture of Leviathan's scale and vector to know that what was coming at Baal was not a battle that could be won by conventional means. He did not suppress this assessment. He began planning for a defense that assumed the worst and built around the question of how long a force could hold against something that large before the equation changed. The devastation of Baal, when everything almost ended. Hive Fleet Leviathan was not like other Tyranid incursions. Other Hive fleets had attacked from the galactic rim, following vectors that Imperial strategists had learned, imperfectly but usefully, to anticipate. Leviathan attacked from below the galactic plane, cutting supply lines and communication routes in a way that no previous Tyranid offensive had managed. And it was enormous. The biomass converging on Baal represented a force that dwarfed anything brought against a single target in any conflict in recorded history, short of the largest engagements of the Horus Heresy. Dante called every Blood Angel successor chapter back to Baal. Successor chapters are their own independent entities. They have their own chapter masters, their own campaign obligations, their own political standing within the imperial hierarchy. Compelling them to abandon current operations and converge on a single system is an act of extraordinary authority that most chapter masters would hesitate to attempt. Dante did not hesitate. Many successor chapters answered, and the combined fleet that assembled around Baal was the largest gathering of Sanguinius's bloodline since the founding of the successors themselves. It was not enough. The Tyranid fleet was so large that the combined Blood Angels forces, every orbital defense platform, every naval vessel Dante could position, were overwhelmed. The fighting in space was desperate and ultimately unable to prevent Leviathan from reaching Baal itself. On the surface of the moons and the primary world, the battles became the kind of attritional grinding that Tyranid warfare is specifically optimized to produce and that conventional military thinking has no reliable answer for. For every warrior that fell to Blood Angel's blades, 10,000 organisms replaced it. The hive mind did not tire, it did not grieve, it consumed endlessly at the industrial scale that is the only scale it knows. Baal Secundus was lost. The irradiated desert moon that had produced Dante, that had broken children and made them hard enough to become blood angels, was stripped and devastated by the hive fleet, its surface biomass consumed. Baal Primus was similarly ravaged. The fortress monastery of the blood angels on the primary world, the Arx Angelicum, was breached. The fighting moved into its corridors. Dante was on the walls personally. By that point, the strategic situation had progressed to a place where strategy was no longer the relevant variable. What mattered was how many could be killed before they killed you. During the final stages of the defense, the Sanguinor appeared, fighting alongside Dante's battered forces with its characteristic ferocity, before vanishing as it always does, leaving no explanation and no trace. Whether its presence turned anything is impossible to quantify. What it did was observable. The Blood Angels who saw it kept fighting past the point at which most forces would have broken. Dante prepared to die on the walls of the Arx Angelicum. The prophecy said the Golden Throne, not this place. Under those circumstances, the prophecy may have felt less like a promise and more like something that had been taken from him. The salvation, when it came, arrived from a direction no one at Baal had done anything to produce. Thousands of light years away, Magnus the Red and the Thousand Suns had launched a devastating psychic assault against the Fenris system, home of the Space Wolves. The sorcery unleashed in that campaign was catastrophic at the level of the warp itself. The immaterium tore open, and the ripples reached Baal. A demonic incursion erupted in the Baal system with no warning. The warp split, and what poured through fell on Tyranid and Space Marine alike. But the demons were drawn specifically to the psychic beacon of the Hive Mind's communion network. The Hive Mind's coordination, the psychic web connecting every organism in the fleet, was shredded by the demonic presence overwhelming it. Organisms lost directive coherence. The fleet that had been consuming Baal with terrible efficiency began to convulse as the psychic infrastructure holding it together collapsed. Vast portions of the Tyranid force, cut off from the Hive Mind's guidance, were destroyed by the Blood Angels in the window of chaos that followed, or consumed by the demonic incursion itself. The Blood Angels survived because a Chaos Space Marine operation on the other side of the galaxy generated a side effect no one had predicted. Dante did not celebrate this. He noted it, assessed it, and stated plainly in the aftermath that the chapter's survival owed more to fortune than to anything done at Baal. A man who had lived 15 centuries and watched enough history to know that the galaxy does not arrange events for human benefit was not surprised to find that survival sometimes looks indistinguishable from luck. Then the reinforcements came. Robot Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines returned from 10,000 years of near death, arrived at Baal at the head of the Indomitus crusade. Among the forces he brought were the Primaris Space Marines, warriors created from Sanguinius's gene seed using techniques Archmagos Belisarius Kahl had spent 10 millennia developing. The chapter that had been bled nearly to extinction was replenished by warriors who carried the same heritage in a more refined form. Dante, who had spent weeks fighting Tyranids and preparing to die, met Guilliman as one commander meets another who has arrived after the worst is over. Guilliman is among the most significant figures in the Imperium. He is a living Primarch with 10,000 years of mythological weight attached to his name. Dante received him with the composed reserve of a man who had just defended his chapter's homeworld against the largest Tyranid fleet in history, and had not yet reached the point of deciding how to feel about the rescue. Lord Regent of Imperium Nihilus, the last promotion. The Great Rift, the Cicatrix Maledictum, split the galaxy. The 13th Black Crusade had helped tear it open, and now the Astronomican's light struggled to reach across it. In the region designated Imperium Nihilus, the dark half of the galaxy, that light was barely present at all. Navigation was compromised across vast swaths of Imperial territory. Communication had collapsed. The worlds on the rift's far side were fighting their own wars in isolation, without reinforcement, without reliable supply, without even reliable knowledge of what was happening in the broader Imperium. Guilliman needed a commander for that region. The role required someone with the experience to manage logistics that had no precedent, the authority to coordinate Space Marine chapters and Imperial Guard armies and naval forces spread across a theater the size of half a galaxy, and the personal credibility to hold fractious, isolated forces together in conditions where the normal structures of Imperial command could no longer function reliably. Dante was appointed Lord Regent of Imperium Nihilus. The authority the appointment carries is essentially vice-regal. He coordinates the defense of territories cut off from Terra, receives assessments from commanders operating in isolation, and makes strategic decisions that cannot be reviewed by higher authority because higher authority cannot reach him in any timely way. In practical terms, he is the senior Imperial commander for half the known galaxy. He accepted this with the same quality he has applied to everything since the desert, the practical acknowledgement that the work has to be done, and he is the person who has to do it. The post places him further than ever from Terra, from the Golden Throne, from the place where his prophecy says he will die. The Lord Regent of Imperium Nihilus commands his wars from a position as far from his predicted death as the galaxy's geography allows, which is either an irony or a delay, depending on how the prophecy is eventually read. The Arsenal, war gear of a living relic. The Ax Mortalis predates Dante's tenure as chapter master. Blood Angel's records describe it as a power axe of singular craftsmanship. The disruption field so precisely calibrated that it maintains cutting consistency against armor of any grade that most modern power weapons cannot match over sustained engagements. Dante's proficiency with it after 15 centuries borders on something beyond mastery in any conventional sense. He does not use it with the aggressive, overwhelming power of a warrior in the grip of the Red Thirst. He uses it with the economy of a man who has fought enough battles to know that speed and precision matter more than force, and that energy spent on a single enemy needs to be available for the next one. The Perdition pistol is a modified Inferno pistol firing focused Melta energy at close range. The tactical picture a Melta weapon creates is specific. Closing to effective range requires either confidence in one's durability or a willingness to accept the risk of proximity to return a level of damage that overcomes almost any armored target. Dante has demonstrated sufficient durability to justify the confidence across 15 centuries of engagements. The icon of the angel, his ancient jump pack, is maintained by the chapter's tech marines with the reverence appropriate to a relic of its age. Its mechanical function is standard for a Blood Angel's jump pack. Its symbolic weight is not. When Dante descends in battle, the golden wings of the icon spread behind the death mask, and the image, repeated across 15 centuries of Blood Angel's iconography, has become the visual shorthand for everything the chapter represents: the beauty, the grief, the ferocity, the impossible endurance. The death mask itself is ancient enough that its precise origins have been obscured by time. It is crafted in gold to the features of Sanguinius, with a fidelity that suggests direct reference to the Primarch's face rather than reconstruction from description or portrait. Whether it was made during Sanguinius's lifetime or cast immediately after his death is not recorded. Chapter masters of the Blood Angels have worn it since records of its existence begin. When Dante wears it in battle, the combined effect of the mask, the golden armor, the wings behind him, and the bearing of a warrior with 15 centuries of war behind him creates something that even hardened commanders on both sides have difficulty looking at steadily. Dante and his successors, the Blood Angels family. Dante's relationship with the successor chapters does not reduce cleanly to authority and deference, and treating it as if it did would miss what makes it significant. The successors carry the same gene seed, the same flaws, the same fundamental inheritance. They have their own identities, their own traditions, their own command cultures. The Flesh Terrors, under their long-serving chapter master Gabriel Seth, are the most prominent example of a successor chapter whose culture has diverged significantly from the original. The Flesh Terrors are brutal even by the standards of Space Marine warfare. They have been formally censured by the Inquisition for conduct during engagements that exceeded the operational mandate. They have faced proceedings that questioned their continued existence as a chapter. They are what happens when the worst possibilities of the Blood Angel's genetic inheritance are given an institutional shape. Dante's relationship with Seth is characterized in the sources by an absence of comfort and a presence of mutual understanding that does not require comfort to function. Seth is aggressive, impatient with ceremony, and carries the Blood Angel's grief in a rougher register than Dante's more controlled bearing. They disagree, sometimes substantially. They share the understanding of what the flaw costs in terms that only come from having sent brothers to the death company and watched them go. That shared knowledge runs beneath the disagreements and has, across centuries, proven more durable than either man's objections to the other. Dante's position as senior Blood Angels commander also means that successor chapter masters look to him for guidance on the management of the Black Rage and Red Thirst, in a way that has no equivalent in most founding chapter relationships with their successors. He's not simply a military superior. He is the keeper of the lineage's most difficult knowledge. He has spent more time managing the flaw than any living being, across more cases in more operational contexts than anyone else. When a successor chapter master faces a surge in Black Rage cases threatening operational coherence, the consultation that actually matters is with Dante. He has never enjoyed this role and has never refused it. The face behind the mask, who Dante actually is. After 15 centuries, after all the battles and all the losses and all the weight of an unbroken command, what remains of the man who started as a child named Luis on a desert moon is not easy to locate. He has worn another man's face for over 1100 years. He has defined his purpose in terms of a Primarch he never met. The boundary between Dante and the mask, between the individual and the symbol he has inhabited so completely, is not a line he can draw cleanly. The patience he operates with is not a temperamental trait. It is the product of extreme longevity, developed by accumulating enough evidence that the first read of any situation is rarely complete. He has watched situations that seemed catastrophic resolve into manageable problems, and watched situations that seemed stable collapse into disaster. He does not rush. This is not complacency. It is the settled confidence of a man for whom urgency has been wrong enough times to have lost its automatic authority. His demands on the warriors under his command focus less on tactical perfection, though he expects it, than on character. On honor, on the maintenance of the qualities he associates with Sanguinius's example. A Blood Angel who fights brilliantly but without honor fails Dante in a way that a Blood Angel who fights imperfectly but with integrity does not. This creates a command culture that is distinctive and that warriors from other chapters sometimes find difficult to operate within, particularly those whose own formations prize results above the manner of achieving them. His honesty in contexts where honesty is uncomfortable is one of the more consistent things the sources record about him. He told Gilliman plainly that the Blood Angel's survival at Baal owed more to fortune than to anything the chapter had done. He has told chaplains in conversations the chapter has preserved that his relationship with faith in the Emperor is complicated by 15 centuries of watching the Imperium make catastrophic errors, and that the light of the Golden Throne, dimmed as it is, may not burn as brightly as the dogma insists. He believes in duty. He believes in the chapter. His beliefs about the Emperor himself are more complex than the official position would prefer. And then there is the loneliness, which defies clean description. Space Marines are not humans, and the emotional architectures of beings who have been enhanced and transformed as they have do not map precisely onto human categories. But the isolation of being the longest-lived commander in the Imperium, the impossibility of genuine equals across a span of time that has outlasted every peer relationship he has ever formed, has produced in him a solitude he manages rather than overcomes. He does not perform stoicism about it in the sources that address it. He carries it the way he carries everything else, because carrying it is the job. What comes next? The era Indomitus. With the Indomitus Crusade replenishing Blood Angel's forces and Dante appointed as Lord Regent of Imperium Nihilus, the oldest commander in the Imperium has entered a new phase of a war that has never stopped. Half the galaxy is under his nominal command. Half the galaxy is isolated, contested, and fighting its own battles in the dark of the Rift's far side. Chaos incursions that were once containable with coordinated Imperial response are occurring in an environment where coordination is no longer reliable. Xenos threats that were held in check are expanding into the disruption. The Chaos Space Marine warbands ranging out of the Eye of Terror and the Maelstrom have pushed into territory that was previously too well defended to reach. Dante is managing all of this with what he has always had, the accumulated experience of 15 centuries, the strategic patience of a man who has watched enough wars to know when to press and when to hold, the specific ferocity of the Blood Angel's genetic heritage and everything he has built on top of it, and the unquantifiable advantage of being the person in any given room who has simply seen more than anyone else present. The prophecy has not been forgotten. Terra waits somewhere in the future. The Golden Throne waits. Somewhere ahead, in a future the Lord Regent of Imperium Nihilus cannot precisely date. The chapter master who has outlived everyone and everything will make his way back to the Imperial Palace and fight his last battle. The galaxy will be diminished by his passing and the better for having had him for so long. That day has not arrived. Until it does, the work continues. Final assessment. Why Dante matters. Dante's significance to the Blood Angels is not reducible to his battles, though his military record is without peer. His war gear, his tactics, the strategic record of 11 centuries of command, that accounting runs for pages and tells you approximately nothing about why he matters. He is the continuity. He is the thread connecting a chapter that traces its unbroken lineage to Sanguinius himself, reorganized in the shadow of the Primarch's death, carrying his inheritance intact across 10,000 years, through 11 centuries of his own command, and into the chaos of the 41st millennium's closing years. He has been the fixed point around which the chapter has organized itself. He has been the person who remembers, who witnesses, who refuses to let the dead become simply data on a casualty roll. He is also the clearest example in all of the Imperium of what it actually costs to be effectively immortal in a universe that is perpetually at war. Not the cost in battle, though that cost is real, and he has paid it repeatedly. The cost in grief. The cost of accumulating loss across a span of time so long that any ordinary psychology would have fractured under it before reaching the century mark. Dante has not fractured. He's continued, and he's done so not by suppressing what the losses cost him, but by insisting on carrying them honestly, one name at a time. A child born on a desert moon to a dying mother, raised by a tribe that survived together or not at all, who became through 1,500 years of war the most experienced military commander the Imperium has produced, and who still wears the face of a god he never met and still carries the memory of every brother he has ever lost. The mask is not the man. The mask is what the man chose to become, and chose again, every day for over 1,000 years. That distinction is the whole of the story and the part of it that the golden face can never tell you.